Welcome to our webinar on mastering the art of Indian cuisine and wine. My name is Dr. Liz Thach, and I'm president of Wine Market Council, and we're very excited to bring you this webinar today with two special speakers, which I'll introduce in just a minute. And we are also doing this as a partner with the Asian Wine Association of America. So you'll be seeing Susan Lin, president, in just a moment. We're thrilled about the fact that we finally were able to put this together because it's such an important topic that not a lot of people know about. So I'm going to go ahead and just share with you a little bit of the business rationale as well as the pleasure behind food and wine that sort of causes the impetus for this webinar. So with that in mind, I'm going to share some slides and do some introductions for our speakers. All right, mastering the art of pairing wine with Indian food. You can see some of these beautiful Indian dishes right here, and you're going to hear a lot more about them from the guest speakers. So real quickly, just the mission of Wine Market Council is to conduct market research on the U.S. wine consumer buying habits, attitudes, and trends. And that sort of links to the mission of the Asian Wine Association of America to champion the wines of Asian Americans and Asian vintners in the U.S. So that's part of why we're coming together in this collaboration, in this partnership of pairing wine with multicultural cuisine. Now, some of you may not know some of the statistics that are driving this and the business rationale and the importance of the wine industry for the sustainable survival to start pairing wine with multicultural cuisine. And that's mainly because in the last, basically 9 years now, the number of fine dining restaurants in the US has dropped by 40%. This data is from TD Lynx with Nelson IQ, and this graph was created by Danny Breger. He's a board member of Wine Market Council. And then fine dine, and then the fast casual, which is mainly multicultural, is the part that's growing 66%. So, and if we look at the actual food types that are growing, it's Japanese, Mexican, Latin, Indian. And so that's why we're doing this presentation today. And what's declining is American food, deli, barbecue, and ribs. So a lot of the places where wine has been in the past is not really showing up. And a lot of the multicultural people we talk to in our research are saying, I don't see wine paired with my food. And so that's what we're trying to do. And we hope that all of the wineries on this call and the media will assist us in getting this word out. So here's our agenda for today. I'm just wrapping up on the welcome. We're going to then hear from Susan on the importance of Asian Americans and more about what they do at AAWA. And then our first guest speaker is Shekhar, who's going to talk about Indian regions and Nala. And then we'll stop for some Q&A. Then we have our second guest speaker, Anita, talking about architecture of wine and the wine pairing wheel with Indian food and wine, and then followed by a Q&A in our conclusion. So as we do go along, I ask that everybody on this call, please go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A, and Susan and I will be monitoring those. But here's a little more background on our speakers. So first of all, we're going to have Shekhar. He is the founder and CEO of Nala, which he'll tell you more about, but it's mainly a company that produces cultural immersive evenings that bring Indian cuisine and wine together. He's been doing this all up and down the coast of California for a while now. He's a first generation Indian American from Kansas. He'll tell you more about that story. And he's already to date worked with over 200 wineries. And his work has been featured in Wine Spectator, Forbes, Santa Barbara Independent, and Wine Spirits Club of America. After we hear from Shekhar and do some Q&A, we're going to move on to our second guest speaker, Nita Mittal. She is the co-founder and owner of LXB Winery in Paso Robles. And one of the really cool things about Nita is she's built a nationally recognized wine and spice tasting experience at her winery. In fact, I got to experience that. She sent me the spices and the recipes to make Indian butter chicken and pairing it with wine. It was really eye-opening for me. Nita's originally from India. She has 10 years of experience in this area of pairing Indian food and wine. And she has actually been named to Wine Enthusiast Future 40 and featured in Forbes Eater Decanter, and has done showcase her wine at a lot of James Beard dinners. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Susan, who's going to do some brief introductions, and then we'll hear from our guest speakers. Susan, you are up.
Hi, everybody, and a very warm welcome to all of you joining us from near and far. My name is Susan Lin. I'm a Master of Wine, and I'm the president and co-founder of the Asian Wine Association of America. And we are so happy to have you with us today for our webinar, Mastering the Art of Pairing Wine with Indian Cuisine. And for those of us who are new to our community, the Asian Wine Association of America is dedicated to cultivating stories, building bridges, and uplifting Asian American and Pacific Islander, as well as diverse voices across the wine industry and hospitality industries. And our mission centers on championing representation and education and helping professionals and enthusiasts alike find their space and confidence in the world of wine and hospitality. And of course, just bringing people together, regardless of background and culture, through the joys of wine and cuisine. And so as Liz touched upon, like, why are we doing this? Like, why the Asian Wine Association of America, right? So why Asian American consumers matter in our market. So the future of the U.S. wine market belongs to diverse audiences. And as studies show, as non-Hispanic white segments decline among incoming legal age drinkers, engaging multicultural demographics, particularly Asian Americans, is becoming much more of a business imperative. And if you joined our previous webinar, also in collaboration with the Wine Market Council on Asian American consumers, Mike LaCosta, CEO of research and strategy firm Thach, emphasized that the Asian American demographic is critical to our future. And I just want to go through a few main reasons just to recap for that and give some context to what we're going to talk about. So Asian Americans, they really do represent a big part of the next generation of consumers. So Asian Americans are the fastest growing demographic in the country, numbering roughly 28.6 million, which is about 8.4% of the population, which reflects a huge gain of 7 million since 2010. And they're projected to drive 26% of all US population growth between now and 2060. And for context, non-Hispanic whites represent just about 10% of new legal drinking age consumers entering the US market. And so engaging with American audiences is crucial to harnessing the next generation of consumers. And Asian Americans do represent economic power and affluence. So the purchasing power of the national AAPI community stands at a whopping $1.9 trillion, according to the research that was done with Wine Market Council and Ethnofax. And this demographic boasts a median household income of $112,000, far outpacing the national average. And in California alone, Asian American buying power has reached almost $470 billion. Another factor is Asian Americans tend to skew a little bit younger in terms of demographic in the United States, and longevity is also a factor. So roughly half the AAPI population falls in the millennial and Gen X cohorts. And of course, these are the segments with spending power that a lot of markets are wanting to capture. And moreover, Asian American millennials and Gen Xers are projected to have the longest life expectancies of any group. So if you can earn their loyalty today, you're looking at potentially decades of buying power. And finally, Asian Americans are quite an under-indexed market, and so there is opportunity here. And while the AAPI community makes up just over 8% of our population, they currently account for only 5% of US wine consumption. And so the data here reveal an immense room for market growth. And by combining a relatively youthful sector, rising wealth, and longevity, the Asian American consumer group represents a key underserved demographic for the wine and hospitality industries looking to build long-term brand equity. And so I'm just so happy that today's topic is incredibly close to our hearts. At the Asian Wine Association of America, we believe that wine is a unique communal catalyst. And one of the most powerful ways we bring people, heritages, and cultures together is through the profound joys of discovering wine and cuisine pairings. And so while Indian culinary traditions boast a rich history spanning over 4,500 years, the art, science, and market potential of pairing wine with region Indian cuisine has long been underserved. And today we are hoping to start changing that narrative again and more. And so, if you're inspired by what you hear today, I invite you to explore the Asian Wine Association of America and consider joining us as a member. Educational webinars like this one are complimentary for our members. And by becoming part of this association, you aren't just joining an organization, you're joining a growing movement to break barriers, challenge stereotypes, and to uplift diverse voices in wine. So thank you all for being here. With that, I'm delighted to hand the floor over to Dr. Liz Thach to begin today's session. So Liz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for sharing all those fascinating statistics too. So I'm going to just go ahead and hand this right over to Shaker. I think you're really going to enjoy what he has to share, and then we'll pause to do a Q&A at that point. So Shaker, you are on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Susan. Thank you to the Wine Market Council, and thank you to the Asian Wine Association of America. I really appreciate it. Would not have thought this was something that would be possible even a year ago, and here we are. We're talking about Indian cuisine and wine. So thank you. I am going to share a deck to everybody, and here it is. Hopefully, you guys can all see it. And so, what I want to do is I want to discuss a couple of things, which is what India actually is and how you actually can pair Indian cuisine and wine. Break down some of these myths we have specifically about spices and heat. And also, I want to share some pairings that I actually love. And overall, the goal is I want there to be actionable items that you guys can take home where you can share these with your friends. You can go to a restaurant. Overall, I believe simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So wine already is communicated in a complex manner. And Indian cuisine certainly is very intimidating. If you are going to an Indian restaurant and you're looking at the menu and there's 50 items, you're like, oh my gosh, what direction? Where do I go? So hopefully this can break it down in a simplistic and fun manner for everybody. I want to give a little background is that, as mentioned before, my parents originally from South India, they had an arranged marriage and originally from Bangalore specifically. And so my mom is actually Tamil from Tamil Nadu, and my dad is Kannada from the state of Karnataka. And they decided to immigrate over to the United States in a place known for South Asian cuisine and wine, such as the great state of Kansas. So that is where I was born and raised. And my diet consisted of mom's traditional South Indian cooking, being Kansas, near Kansas City. So naturally, a lot of Kansas City barbecue and a lot more fast food than I want to admit. But that was the basis of my diet. And there were about 12 founding Indian families in Kansas, in the community itself, and they all got together. And every weekend, what I didn't realize at the time is that I was spoiled because they would get together and cook these massive feasts. So think of it as every weekend, it was like a Thanksgiving over and over again. There weren't just two, three dishes, there were plethora of dishes. And so this is what all the women in the community, that's what they would do is they would get together, they would cook, and they would share their different dishes from whatever part of India that they were originally from. And so it could have been Gujarati food, Tamil food, Punjabi food. That is where my love of the cuisine actually began. And fast forward to I move out to Los Angeles, and I miss my mom's cooking. And so I said, I'm going to go to every Indian restaurant I can, and I'm going to discover who's doing what. And I would talk to the owners, the chefs, and I myself became fascinated with just all these different dishes that everybody would make. And you kind of learn who's doing what really well. Um, I had friends who wanted to come along with me, and I said, you know what? Let me throw a dinner event, and I'll just prepare my mom's recipes, and I'll pair up with a chef, and they'll provide some of their dishes. And next thing you know, I had 25 people all show up on time, which is a miracle in LA, and we all feasted and dined. There was no alcohol on the table at all. It was just the cuisine, because my passion and love for wine came much later. Growing up, as you can imagine, in Kansas, wine was never on the table. It's not in the culture as well. My parents didn't drink it, but they had bottles at home that they kept just for guests. So if specifically, I should say non-Indian guests. So if they came over, this is something that they would share with them. And so it wasn't until I did these dinner events, and each time I would do another one and I would have a different theme. One would be vegetarian vegan, one would be specifically North Indian cuisine, and another one just be traditionally South Indian cuisine. And I said, gosh, I've been to restaurants and I've seen that they've done a wine pairing. And especially when you get to some of the higher end restaurants, or as they say, the Michelin restaurants, they would always have this wine pairing program. And I said, well, gosh, how fun would it be to pair wine with Indian cuisine? I've just never seen that before. And that only works if I knew something about wine. I literally know nothing about wine. I was the person who, growing up, I saw beer as something that was really enjoyable. I saw wine as something that was very boring. And I saw it as stuffy. You go to a wedding or reception, I was the guy who would just hold the glass close to my chest and just try to fit in. Um, Little do you realize that there are all these wineries that are only a couple hours away, and I discovered a couple of things about them, which is they all love Indian cuisine or just Asian cuisine in general, but they didn't get much of it. And most of them never tried to pair their wine with the cuisine. So that was basically the beginning of how Nullo was built, which is I found this opportunity to marry the South Asian culture and community with the wine industry because the two didn't know much about one another. And so I did one event, and next thing you know, I did one at a winery, and this is now what I do full time. And I chose the name Nulla because it is a Tamil word, which means great in the Indian language, something that was commonly said in the household. Um, as you see in my name, Shaker Satyanarayana, my name got butchered my whole life, all through school, to the point where in law school, teachers didn't want to call on me. But Nulla was something that is easily said, and so that's why I chose the name, and it just resonates really well with my culture. Um, this is what I want to share about India itself. That most people, when they think of India, they think of just one cuisine. India is actually 28 different states, and in each state, they have their own cuisine, they have their own clothing, they have their own dialect. And in fact, if you go in 10 or 15 kilometers in either direction when you're in one of these states, the cuisine and even the dialect changes. That is just how diverse India is. And so, about 1.5 billion people, one third the size of the US, but four times the amount of the people. Uh, just a very diverse country itself. And so, generalizations will say, oh, we're going to go for North Indian cuisine, South Indian cuisine. One of the reasons people will say that is because North Indian cuisine tends to be known for non-veg. So it'll be more meat-based, chicken, lamb, goat dishes. South Indian cuisine, more vegetarian. You're going to talk more about lentils and maybe a little bit more into the spices, the heat, which I'll get into. But they are the country's largest producer of spices. And so it's just a very, very diverse region. And I mentioned a couple of the cuisines that you'll commonly hear about from Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Punjab, Hyderabad. But if you can see in this cursor, this is where my family's all from. And then my mom's family is all from this Tamil Nadu here. And so, really, what I want to get down to is that a lot of people think that heat and spice are kind of the same thing, and they are not. Many of you probably walked into an Indian restaurant or just an Indian kitchen, or maybe just a kitchen where they were cooking Indian cuisine or some sort of Asian cuisine, and you smell this aroma. And immediately, some of you may have thought, just as I did, oh my gosh, like that's going to be really spicy. Whatever they're cooking or preparing, I can't handle. And that's just a myth because there's heat and then there's the actual aromatics. So heat is that compound, specifically capsicum. This is what comes from chili powder, or just if you've ever bitten into one of those chilies and immediately your mouth is throbbing, your tongue is throbbing specifically, and that is that burning sensation. That is the sensation of basically your mouth is on fire. That is going to clash with some of these higher alcoholic, higher tannin wines that basically the alcohol from those wines will act as almost like a gasoline on the fire that's already going on in your mouth. So that's going to fight with the dish, and that's something you do want to manage because it's not a pleasant experience. But when it comes to actual aromatics, these are things such as cumin, coriander, cardamom, cloves, cinnamon. When in doubt, it begins with a C, but these actual spices that you will find commonly in any Indian kitchen. And these are going to be that aroma that you smell from the cuisine itself. And think about it. When we talk about wine, we also talk about, oh gosh, what am I smelling? What am I tasting? Boy, I taste guava. I taste a different fruit. Oh boy, this has got some herbaceousness to it. You can combine these two together. And so really the aromatics, it's really no different than the wine itself. These are things that you can pair with one another. But overall, the spice does not actually mean the heat. Something that commonly comes up with Indian cuisine is turmeric, which is actually it doesn't have this like aromatic sense. If you open up a jar, you don't really smell anything, but it gives the cuisine a golden color, and you see it a lot in the cuisine. And you could say this goes back generations, maybe to Ayurveda, where a lot of people believe that it's got these anti-inflammatory benefits, antioxidants, and so that is something I just wanted to mention. But overall, oftentimes when people will talk about Indian cuisine, they'll say, "Oh gosh, it's got all this heat, or it's so spicy." And you know what? Let's just get a sweet wine. You're really drowning the cuisine when you do that. It's not to say that a sweet wine does not work, but it's not really the intention or purpose. There's so many other things that you can drink with the Indian cuisine. And that brings me to this slide, which is these are four different dishes that are very commonplace. During COVID, I spoke to a lot of the owners at Indian restaurants, and Indian restaurants did extremely well during this time period because Indian cuisine was one of those things that travels very well. Not so much like a burger or a steak where the moment it comes off from the kitchen, you got to eat it immediately. But Indian cuisine, you're rewarded with patience, and these were the most common items that people will order. And I find these items delicious, and everything I'm sharing with you is what I have tested just for my own events, where I provided these same dishes and paired it with different wines. So here you have the samosa, saag paneer, chicken tikka masala, the lamb korma. Specifically with the samosa, the pastry with the potatoes and peas, it's going to have a little bit of a kick on the heat. But ultimately, this is an appetizer that's very commonplace in the Indian community, also spreading across the other Asian countries as well. And what I like to do is provide a sparkling wine. You can do a dry rosé or a sparkling rosé, but the bubbles and the acidity, it just cuts through. It refreshes your palate. And so that's one of my favorite pairings to do. And often in my events, that's going to be the first thing when someone's arriving that will put in their hand is a glass of a sparkling rosé, or it might be something else, and we'll serve a samosa. The saag paneer. So remember when I said about the aromatics and what you can smell? Um, with the saag paneer, it's a very spinach, fenugreek, cream, paneer, herbaceousness. And we often will say that when it comes to wine, and immediately what will come to mind is the Sauvignon Blanc. So you'll get those notes, and it'll just that acidity, it'll lift that cream. This tends to be one of the most favorite pairings at the Nulla events. It just goes magically. It's just a really beautiful way to combine the two. And you can also do a Vermentino. Albarino has been one of my absolute favorites as well. Probably the first white wine I fell in love with, just because it was something and just very different than what I'm used to. But wanted to share that. There's the chicken tikka masala. Now, this is one of the most controversial dishes because oftentimes people say, well, you're having chicken tikka masala. This is what most everybody in the United States will order when they go to an Indian restaurant. But a lot of people will tell you it's not a traditional Indian dish. They'll say it's a British Indian dish, but then there's disputes over that. I'm not here to litigate that story. You can look it up on your own. But that does not take away from the fact that this dish is so comforting for everyone. It is delicious as well. It is one dish that I would say 99% of the time I'm going to have on the menu for everybody because they expect to see it there. And why not? It's very comforting. It's very delicious. You get that tomato base, that cream with that warm spice, and you'll have the chunks of the chicken with it. I like to go with the lighter to medium body red wine with this. There's so many other different directions you can go. Some people say, no, you got to go with the white wine or Chardonnay. Drink what you like, have fun with it. I have a lot of fun pairing it with a Grenache. And I like that red fruit and the soft tannins to meet the tomato and the smoke. It's not a dish that's meant to be have a lot of heat on it. And so this is just one of my other favorite pairings. You can also do the Cab Franc, a Sangiovese. What you're looking at is just those lighter reds where the tannins are going to be much softer. And then finally come to the lamb korma. And this is a dish where, when you talk about a lot of wineries, they want to showcase their Cabernet Sauvignon, or maybe they want to showcase their Syrah or some of their older, more bold red wines. This is the dish to do it with. And the lamb korma is actually going to have some spice to it when you get some of that coconut to it. And it's a dish where oftentimes when I've gone with wineries and sat with them and we'll bring the wines out and we'll pair the two, what we'll do is we'll bring out a younger red, maybe something that's a 22 or 23, but then we'll bring an aged cab and we'll compare the two. And it is just awesome to showcase the difference between the pairings and how it works. When you get one of those aged cabs where the acidity and the fruit are just perfectly in balance, it just goes beautifully with the lamb dish. Originally, when I started doing this and I was started pairing the cuisine wine, I was a little bit concerned about some of these higher tannic, bolder red wines. Uh, it works and it works magically, and it's something that I really love to do at the dinner events, which is just showcase two of the different wines itself. But wanted to share this with you, so maybe next time you're at a restaurant, these are some items that you can order. And then Susan touched on a lot of this, but really wanted to go back to why I started Nella. It really just came out of a passion project. But then as I delved further, I saw that there was just massive opportunity to marry the two cultures together that really don't know one another. And right now, the wine industry is looking for ways to engage with newer demographic, bring other people into the conversation. And I'm here to say that there is this demographic in the Asian community, especially in the Indian American community, and they are there. They are ready and they have disposable income and they have just never been invited into the conversation. Specifically in the demographic of the Indian American community, it's the highest household income in America. So they have disposable income, and a majority of them are have a bachelor's degree, and it's the fastest growing segment in the US. And of those, around 6 million, I think about 20% are actually in the state of California. And if you want to go even further, they're all in the Bay Area. And so they're not far away from, the Napa, Sonoma, all those regions. But they're there. And when at my events, I have percentage of South Asians, Indians that will come and attend my events. And they know a decent amount about the cuisine, but they don't know anything about the wine. And so that's something that they are very interested to learn about. And that I enjoy doing that. I enjoy that hand holding at the events. Um, but this is why this is what Nulla is. I just wanted to, share this is why I do these events. At my events itself, I tell everybody, Italian cuisine has had its moment, French cuisine has had its moment, even barbecue. If you're in Kansas City, if you're in Texas, if you're in Memphis, everybody wants to brag about their barbecue. This is Indian cuisine, South Asian cuisine. This is their moment right now. And I like to say, you're not stepping into a winemaker dinner event, you're stepping into an experience. I am helping transport you without traveling into a celebration of India. So it's not just going to be the cuisine, it's not just going to be the wine, but it's also going to be the decor, the tali plate experience, classical Indian dance performance, musical performances, sitar, tabla. I want everybody to really be immersed into the culture itself because the cuisine and the culture, it's very emotional for people in India. And I want that to really come out because I do believe wine can be very emotional for everyone. I don't remember what I'm drinking specifically in terms of varietal or whatever it may be. It really comes in the context of who I'm with and what is that moment about. And so, my wife and I, we just celebrated our anniversary and we opened a bottle and we're going to remember that bottle forever. And so I would hope that everybody else can enjoy this experience. But yeah, this is Nola. I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you.
All right, Shaker, thank you so much. We actually have several questions for you if you want to stop sharing your presentation and come back
Absolutely.
on screen. Excellent.
Yep.
Okay, lots of really good questions here. So the first one is, when pairing wine with Indian cuisine, how much of the challenge comes from the capsicum, the heat, and you mentioned that briefly, itself, versus the complex spice profile? So specifically, do you find that the chili heat tends to exaggerate the tannins and alcohol in red wines enough that it fundamentally limits red pairings? So I know you partially answered this, but if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm glad because there's something else I want to mention about that. But yes, if you have a lot of heat, you have a lot of that, that chili powder too much, it's going to fight. It's going to clash with those higher alcohol, higher tannic wines. Um, it's just simple that chemistry. Something in Indian cuisine that they discovered and that I definitely want to mention is that when they're bringing out all the cuisine and it's on the thali plate, you also will have something called raita. And whether many of you may know this or not, but when you go to Indian restaurants, they'll bring out this yogurt dish. And the yogurt dish will have minced cucumbers, tomatoes, sometimes it'll have carrot, and it is a cooling sensation for your palate. Um, as I mentioned before, capsicum that binds to your tongue, that receptor, and it creates that throbbing sensation. Milk, when you have that, that is ripping off those receptors on your tongue. So don't be like me, where when I was a kid and I was eating something really hot, and then I started drinking water. That was just spreading the flames in my mouth. And then my parents got me milk, and immediately I was like, okay, good. I've stopped sweating, I've stopped crying, and it cooled. But getting back to that question, yes, when you are
Yeah.
drinking the wine, it's going to fight if you get one of those higher tannic, higher alcohol reds, um, but everything can be in balance in the acidity. And if you're eating the dish, I mentioned the raitha because sometimes when people are eating that dish, they'll take some of the raitha and then they're cooling their palate, and then you can go to the wine. But ultimately, you want to find that harmony.
Right. And I think that's why you mentioned the older Cabernets, because the oak is already sort of integrated well in, because you don't want heavy new oak, higher alcohol. That's why I like a lighter Grenache that's more fruity, or Syrah works. And I know Nita's going to speak more to this as well, but thanks
Yeah.
a lot for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Let's see. I have some questions here that I'm going to save for Nita, because I know she's going to talk about butter chicken. But here's another one. Any pairing suggestions for wine with South Indian dishes like dosa or ideally sambar? I don't even know what those are, so hopefully you do.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that because when it comes to the South Indian dishes with the lentils, so oftentimes with a lot of those South Indian dishes, you're going to have a little bit more heat on them, and you might not, but I mentioned some of those whites, but I really love going with the Viognier, and I like the acidity on that. I still do like Riesling as well. I just, not going a little too sweet with that, but when I've done a Viognier, I found a happy place with those lentils. So I would recommend that. And again, I think sparkling is delicious with sparkling rosé is fantastic. Pairing with those lentils.
Okay, great, great. And there was a question about Riesling. I know we're basically saying sweet Riesling's not really the answer with a lot of this food, but what about a dry Riesling? And would you recommend a domestic one or a German one?
So yeah, dry Riesling is what I go for. I have not had as many of these Rieslings from the Mosel region over in Germany, but I will tell you, there's some great ones that are up in Napa and then you go into the Anderson Valley. But some of those, when it comes to Riesling, I prefer the dry. Um, some people will say this, this more of the sweeter Rieslings. But I think a lot of that's also just where people are with wine. A lot of people come into wine initially starting with something that's more on the sweeter side, and then they kind of transition over to the more of the like tannic side. But dry Riesling specifically, I love those, and I don't feel like I've ever had a bad Riesling from Germany, from Alsace region, from Mosel, personally.
Yeah, they're all quite beautiful. All right, well, thank you. We do have some other questions I'm going to save for Nita because I know she's going to touch upon some of these things. And Nita, too, you can look at the questions as you go along, but we'll answer them at the end. So thank you, Shekhar. And now I'd like to encourage Nita Mittal to join us, and please share your slides.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Thach, for inviting me to this. I just got back from Aspen Food and Wine, and I'm getting over a rough cold, and Kunal's helping me out in the background. So all these gestures of Kunal is helping me out. Could I second what Shekhar just said about everything that he does? I have experienced it myself. I have attended his events, and I have to say, um, it is an immersive event. He does a couple of them in Paso every year. So it's an honor to share the screen with you, Shekhar. Um, Thank you, everyone, for joining. I have a few friends on here too. So thanks, friends, for joining. This is going to be exciting. I'm going to try to present a paradigm which is a little bit above things that are usually said about food and wine when it comes to Indian food. I'm looking forward to the questions in the end, especially ones like, was butter chicken made in the UK? And no, it was not, but we'll talk about that. There you go. Can you tell me if you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see your
Okay,
screen.
perfect.
Yes,
All right,
everything looks
just a
good.
quick introduction. My name is Neeta Mittal. My husband and I, we own LXV Wine, and it's actually a house of Mittal with three different um, um, sort of persuasions, if you will. There's LXV, which is based a lot on culinary art travels, Meso by LXV, which has a lot to do with are very site-specific wines, and then there is a Maison Mittal, which is our geekery, our persuasion for Bordeaux. So much so that we make wine in Bordeaux. We make wine in Saint-Emilion. And the reason I wanted to talk about these, because of the House of Mittal, before I talk about myself, is one thing that I identified long ago. There's something interesting about architecture that is persuasive no matter if it is the wine or the food. And little did I know that it'll find its way into this presentation. But that is something Kunal and I, we've been pursuing for the last 15 years, is a deep dive into different architectures. Now, the architecture could be terroir, the architecture could be the wine itself, the cuisine. It definitely holds interest for both Kunal and I. And so it's interesting how it found its way into this presentation. Let me see, there you go. My name is Neeta, as I said. I'm from a very small town in India called Kolhapur. If you've heard of Mumbai, we are south of Mumbai. It's known for its spices. It's known for its leather shoes. Prada is having quite a field day with our city, and I like to say, and it's known for its beautiful women. And Kolhapur is considered to be one of those cities that get identified with spice. So if you go to certain Indian restaurants, they'll actually have a chicken called Kolhapuri chicken, which is inspired by my city. Lots of spice. We are talking about whatever Shekhar talked about, capsaicin, override of that. Huge capsaicin, a lot of chili, an exciting place to grow up. My mother is from that area. My dad's from the south of India, where Shekhar is from. He's actually from Kerala. And so I grew up with a confluence of spices. And I'm married to Kunal, who is from the north. And it's interesting, north of India had a lot of Persian influence. The south of India had a lot of Dravidian influence. And so the cuisines could not be different. And so I've been married to Kunal for 25 years. We are actually celebrating our 25th anniversary in less than a week. And so this kind of spectrum of spices and flavors has been an very interesting thing to play with. And then along came Paso Robles. That's actually my vineyard, our estate vineyard, called Arman Vineyard. And somehow, unknowingly, unwittingly, wine and spice kind of started weaving into each other and created a very interesting experience for us. So this is the basic don'ts and do's. We'll talk about that first before we dive into the paradigm that I'm talking about, that I'm very passionate to talk about. This is everything Shaker touched on. The don'ts, Riesling with everything. How 2008 is that? We can do better than that. Big reds, just because it's Indian. Go for the big wine. Somebody asked that question, and I would say when you go to an Indian restaurant, when they ask you scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, it's a little bit different than Asian restaurants where you want to dial it up and go 8, 9, and 10. Because in Asian restaurants, when I say Asian, think about like a Hainan cuisine or Chinese. Sometimes that spice is fun. In Indian cuisine, ask for the opposite. If you want flavor, if you really want to understand what the chef is aspiring for you to taste, go absolutely at the bottom. Don't be afraid. You're still going to get a lot of flavor. Sometimes I think we want to get the higher dial because we think that's where the flavor comes from. Go to the lowest dial and you will enjoy Indian food so much more. Beer, Shaker was talking about that, and I rolled my eyes. I'm like, no, there's so much better we can do than beer. Sweet wine, this point has been overdone. And one wine for the whole meal. Indian food is a little bit different. We don't course our meals. Everything comes together. It's almost always family style, even when you go to a restaurant, unless it's a pre-fee of some sort. And so to assume that one wine pairs with all, kind of a misnomer. The do's, low alcohol, low tannin, high acid, aromatic lift, all touched by Shaker. One important thing is serving your wine a little bit chilled because it does play with Indian food so much better for reasons that you all obviously know because you're all wine experts and food experts. Now that we have the blueprint out of the way, let me hit on what I'm very passionate about. And if I can drive this point home today, I'll be so happy. Indian food is no different than everything else you eat. And I absolutely mean that. It's architecture meets architecture. Any dish, Indian dish you can think of, there is a shared architecture and probably something you're having in your day-to-day food or Italian cuisine or French cuisine. Where it gets interesting is the spices and the herbs, and they start painting that architecture and creating sort of this space for themselves with the spices and herbs. And that's where the wine becomes interesting, where the wine kind of starts bending or needs to bend, not change, but just bend a little bit towards that light, if you will. So very simple example to begin with, to drive home this point of architecture meets architecture. And I'm going to keep a watch on my time. Tomato bisque, we all know that. Basic tomato, buttercream, onion, garlic, kind of the velvety texture. That's what butter chicken is. It really is the basis of all of that. And then you add some chicken to it. It could be grilled or not. Some ginger, some fenugreek, which is you top the butter chicken. It's beautiful, aromatic. Garam masala, we all know what that is. And a little bit of red chili, just a little bit. Specifically a chili called Kashmiri chili that comes from the Himalayas. It's exactly the same dish, but you have changed the light. You've changed the space a little bit. And as you can see, the architecture is exactly the same, but the spice is what, it's given it a lift. It's given it a color, a movement, hopefully a little bit of a heartbeat as well. So basically what we're saying is it's going to be the same wine. But remember, that's what I said. The wine doesn't have to change. It just needs to bend a little bit. So for tomato bisque, you would go for a classic Chardonnay. For butter chicken, lifted. Lifted is a great word to think about Indian food and wine pairing. You want lifted aromatics. You want riper fruit. The oak restraint, we talked about that. Lower alcohol. So you're thinking about the same wine, just maybe from a warmer region, maybe from Maconnais instead in Burgundy. So you're thinking about the same wine, just a different posture. That's what you're thinking of. I will drive home the same point with three other examples, very, very quick. We talked about the comparison between tomato bisque and butter chicken. Think about tandoori chicken. Tandoori chicken is nothing but grilled chicken added with some tandoori spices. And I'll drive home this point. If you have a Trader Joe's, there is a chicken that's available in Trader Joe's right now. It's pre-marinated with lemon and butter. It's spatchcocked, I think that's what it's called. Beautiful. Kunal and I, we just got back from Aspen. Love the food there, but we were craving Indian food. There's no Indian restaurant there. This is what we did. We got that on our way from the airport. I kid you not. Came home and just added some tandoori masala to it. Stuck it in the oven. We had our tandoori chicken. It was interesting as I was doing that. I'm like, I'm actually literally living what I'm preaching, which is fantastic. Sheikh kebab. It's nothing but a burger. And then you add spices to it, and now you have what we call sheikh kebab. Very prevalent in Indian cuisine, prevalent in Persian cuisine. So if you think about the grilled chicken, the tandoori, you're giving it a lift. You're giving vermentino, sauve blanc. If you're thinking about burger, you're thinking about something that has structure but not too much heaviness, because now you have spices for the sheikh kebab. So you have a syrah, you have a cabernet franc, which honestly is one of my favorite reds to pair across Indian cuisine. So this is the point I want to drive home. Same architecture, same pairing logic, just bend the wine, lift it a little bit. So this is a fun thing that I'm working on. So all our three examples, and I don't know if you can see my cursor here, all the three examples are here. There's butter chicken, tandoori chicken, and sheikh kebab. I talk about what is the base for each one of them, what's the spice that they bring, and then what is the profile of the wine, what is, whoops, sorry about that, what is the wine that you would want to pair with it. And on the outside, I have the fun wine. You know, Indian cuisine is so complex and so layered that you can actually play with it. Now, we have Indian food all the time. So when you say Grenache Rosé, Sauv Blanc, Vermentino, I'm like, that's great, but I want to play with my food. And this is where it gets interesting, where we can pair it with wines that are interesting, that are quote unquote out of place, that have gone through transformation. I'll tell you, wines that have gone to certain sort of transformation, and you will say all wines go through transformation, but there are some that, for example, orange wine or the wines from Jura, you know what I'm talking about. So they just have a different kind of complexity to play with Indian food. And I love doing that because for me, Indian food is like a playground for food and wine pairing. This is something that I'm working on. Trademark pending on the advice of a dear friend who's on this panel. This is a wheel that I'm working on. It's still a work in progress. And the idea is to take most of our prevalent dishes, dividing down into categories and thinking about how do I simplify it? Now, there is one row that I'm going to add to it is when you talk about tomato base, first, what are the common dishes we can think of, and then go to the Indian dish that would be a parallel, like the parallel that I did between tomato bisque and butter chicken. I want to do that for each, like the burger and sheikh kebab. I want to do for each of these. And then I want to do 3 different wheels, but we'll talk about that some other time. If you want to, so Kunal, I'm married to a tech guy. He was so excited about this. He created a fun wheel pairing thing literally within a few hours. Go AI. So if you want to play with it, lxvwine.com/pair-Indian. Again, it's not perfect. As he was excited to create this for me, so I thought, okay, I'll put that on. I have to talk about biryani separately. That's the holy grail. Biryani is like the royal dish of India. It is what risotto means to Italian cuisine. It's what paella means to Spanish cuisine. Shekhar mentioned earlier how literally every 15 miles the cuisine changes. Every 15 miles the story of biryani changes. This is almost every Indian's comfort food. Very, very complex to make. I'll tell you that. But once you have it, it's just absolutely soulful. My mom, I call her Ai, and Ai's biryani takes about 2 days to make. Usually, when you read about it on Google, that's on the left-hand side, Prosecco, Chenin, Dry Rosé Gamay, Pinot Noir. This is where I break the rule that I myself said. When I said no sweet wines, this is where I would say go for the sweet. So when we traditionally make biryani, especially from the north of India, we use a dried plum. And that dried plum comes, it kind of disintegrates in the biryani because it's hours and hours of cooking and gives this sweetness juxtaposition to the whole spices and to the fried onion and then the succulent chicken. I love to pair this with like a sauternes or takai or zamuradni, which, it's like a more restrained version of takai. I did this food and wine pairing dinner with Ray Isles, who is the editor of Food and Wine magazine, completely names dropping here, only because it was wonderful to see him appreciate that pairing with, I believe I did it with sauternes. It was a while ago. I'm going to touch on Indian dessert just because, we're talking Indian food and wine pairing. This is Indian dessert is like, it's almost unapologetically sweet. And so to pair it with another sweet wine is like dessert on dessert. So usually you want to go through wine that again has had some sort of a deep transformation. I'll tell you something. I'm not a very good expert at this. This is something I'm still understanding. Sherries I love, Madeiras I love. So it's easy for me to put those, but I want to explore this a little bit more in my experiments. But I want to step back from everything that we talked about and we said Indian food and wine pairing and architecture meets architecture. I think this truth is universal. It's not just about Indian cuisine. It's about all the different, what get quoted as ethnic cuisines. There is a certain architecture because we have to respect the Silk Road, the Silk Route that had influences going back and forth with not only spices, but techniques and cuisines. And so you have empanada, you have tempura, you have samosa, kind of is a very similar interpretation. I talked about the paellas. So I mean, the breads, if you start talking about breads and the universality of that, it's really phenomenal. And so I honestly think any cuisine, it's great that I get in this seminar to talk about the Indian food and wine, but this is a universal truth. And we do this as LXV, and I wanted to show you something very interesting we do at LXV. We build these bridges between wine. And what I like to say is we build these bridges between your kitchen and your cellar. We have a Sauv Blanc Semillon that we pair with this spice blend from the country of Georgia. It's called Camelli Suneli. If you can think something as classic as Sauv Blanc Semillon from the Bordeaux region, and you're taking a spice from the country of Georgia, can you even imagine the conversations in our tasting room? It gets very, very interesting. That has fenugreek, marigolds, it has dill, mint. All of these are curated by us in-house. We have a Left Bank Bordeaux blend led by a cab, and there's a butter chicken spice. We have created a spice that actually tastes like butter chicken, where we use roasted chickpea flour to give you that sort of chicken-like umami, and it's a phenomenal dish. I believe that's the one I sent Dr. Thach. And then Syrah with, it says sheikh kebab. That's actually a big mistake. I should have corrected on that. The Syrah actually gets paired with, on the wheel with the sheikh kebab, but at LXV, it gets paired with the spice called smolder notes. And it's a Lapsang Souchong tea. It's a smoked tea from China. We do sarsaparilla. We do rosemary, smoked paprika. When we have those conversations, when we have those pairings at the tasting room, it's amazing that there are conversations about barbecue that come up, about memories that come up, about certain trips that people have taken that come up. So what's exciting about pairing wine with spices, not just Indian, but spices and flavors from all over the world, is yes, it's a food and wine pairing, but it's a deep dive for people into what could they do in their kitchen? What could they do? Because none of the kitchens right now have just salt and pepper. There's a reason why you've logged on to this seminar, because hopefully your spice cabinet is a little bit more colorful than that. But you're not always cooking butter chicken or pilaf or empanada for that matter. You are just sprinkling a spice on something just to see what the transformation looks like. And that's the great thing about wine and these spices from all over the world is wine will bridge those make those bridges with those spices. Give
All
me
right.
any
Thank.
protein.
So sorry, Nita. We're
Uh,
starting to run
okay,
into
I'm
some
done.
time constraints, and you have lots of questions.
Okay, so
So,
I'm going to leave with just this one.
mhm.
That if you want to experience this universal truth, as I like to call it, this is a small format box that we have at LXV. If you go onto LXV, you can see the link there. And also, I do this in association with Master the World, and so they're bottled at a very high standard. Court of Psalms uses them for bottling, and they have generously offered a 25% discount for all the people who have joined. Thank you so
Oh,
much for joining. This is fantastic. I'm going to get off my screen.
all right. Thank you, Nita.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so Nita sent me a packet of her spices that was for the butter chicken, and I actually paired it with Pinot Noir, and I thought it worked beautifully. So actually, that was one of the questions, Nita, is where does Pinot Noir fit into this? Is it somewhere on your wheel?
It leads. Pinot Noir is so it's such lifted aromatics, which Shaker touched upon aromatics so many times. It's so important to uh, let's get the word heat out of Indian food. Honestly, Indian food is very, very innocent. The spice, whatever spices we use, if you've ever bloomed spices, the aromatics, that's what Indian food is about. That kind of warmth that it creates here, that's what Indian food is about. And so when we talk about Pinot Noir, it dances with Indian food. The biryani, beautiful pairing. Butter chicken, beautiful. So yes, Pinot Noir, not too tannic, which also helps. And so I'm all for Pinot Noir for Indian food.
Wonderful. So somebody said too that they are going to Indian restaurants and they keep getting served cocktails. So what's going on there?
Um, this is something actually I'm working on very actively. I am creating a module to talk to Indian restaurants on how they could pair Indian food with wine. It's just the reason you getting offered cocktail is because the team has never really touched on the subject of Indian food and wine. The fact that we have to have this seminar shows you that it is a specialty subject. It is something we have to explore. And so it's my mission to create something that is so simple for the Indian hospitality, restaurant hospitality to understand on how they can create the bridges between their food and their wine. And honestly, one of the biggest drivers for this conversation is just the revenue that it will bring, and then once that's the impetus, which is very important for any change in an organization, it'll be beautiful to see a Montrachet with Indian food or a gamay from a Gras Cru with Indian food. That would be such a great conversation to have.
Wonderful. Yeah, so there's another question here about somebody who read the fine dining piece in the Chronicle about like Copra has been winning wine awards. And so you mentioned you're hoping to see more Indian restaurants moving towards fine wine lists, and I know you've told me you've gone to a couple of Michelin star Indian restaurants where there's some nice wine pairing. So can you just sort of talk about the world of fine wine and fine Indian dining?
Srijit, who is the chef at Copra. What a wonderful person. He owns Copra, Etan, and Elan, these three restaurants. And Copra is in San Francisco, the other two are in South Bay. And he understands the importance of wine. He has a song. I think he has two songs on his team. And what's interesting is I met somebody at the Aspen Food and Wine who works with Resi, and they mentioned that that was one of the best food and wine pairing dinners that they have had, was the Indian food and wine pairing. And it also has to do with the personality of the chef to be open. to possibilities, and that's who Srijit is. I do want to give a shout out to, and I do not remember his last name. There is an Indian restaurant in New York called the Indian Accent, and there used to be a master som there by the name of Michael something. And if you Google it, 100% he'll come up. He did Indian food and wine pairing for, I believe it was an Austrian delegation, all of that with Sauterne. Every course paired with Sauterne. Please don't think Sauterne is sweet wine, completely different the way it's made. Yes, it's sweet, but the reason it's sweet is so different. It is because of the botrytis, the lift is there, the acidity is there. It's not a late harvest, so it pairs very differently than a late harvest or a sweet wine would. So there are many chefs in New York. There's a group called the Unapologetic Group, which does phenomenal work in food and wine. So yeah, lot of Indian restaurants are taking and leading the charge on this conversation. Even more and more as the consumer, the diner is being aware and not asking for just chicken tikka masala. Honestly, and thank God it's gone beyond that, where they do want to know that, there is escargot that comes from the south of India. Nobody knew. Srijit has now put it on his menu. So those kind of conversations are happening now.
Yeah, I think we're going to see the growth of that, and it's super exciting. So last question on Viognier, and then I'll just sort of open it up to Shekhar and Nita for some final comments. I know we're at noon already, but Viognier, butter chicken, yes or no? Should it be from California or France?
Shekhar, go first.
I mean, I think you can do both, but I might steer a little bit more towards maybe the California version of it, personally. And again, I'm just speaking from experimentation of what I've tried and what I've gone, and I've worked with wineries. Viognier always shines. I know we said there's not just one wine that'll just go with everything, but if I was forced to just bring one bottle, it would be a Viognier. And
And a drier one,
yeah,
or
a dry one.
fruity but dry. Yeah, because
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I'm maybe a little bit more biased towards the American one and maybe something from California.
Yeah. Thank
Can
you
I
very
plug
much.
in? Can I say Condro?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would love
that
to
was the
say Condro with Indian food. It's such a delight. I love that. I love that pairing.
Okay, great. And then there was a question to Nita about your LXB Sauvignon Blanc Semillon blend versus LXB Secret.
The Sauv Blanc Semillon is a white offering, and then the secret is a left bank Bordeaux inspired blend led by Cab. It has some Merlot
Oh, it's
Cabernet
red.
Franc peat in
Okay.
it. It's a red
So
wine.
right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I hope that our audience today received a lot of great ideas. I know I did when I started working with Nita and Shaker. I was blown away because I was one of those people who thought Indian food with Riesling, sweet Riesling. I really was. And so I've learned a lot, especially the fact that the wines should be a lower alcohol, less oak, bright fruit, reds a little bit, chilled the way they should be when you talk about what the French do wine. Just the flavors and the spice and the texture and the fact that Indian food isn't actually all that spicy. In fact, when Anita sent me her spice kit, I made the butter chicken and I was really surprised. It was so delicious, but it wasn't hot. And I even put the hottest I could in there, and it still wasn't that hot for me. I grew up in New Mexico on green chili though, but anyway, I'm so excited, and I hope you got some good ideas. We are going to be sharing these slides, and then I know that they both have given you their website, so you can find more information there. And Nita, we're so excited about the wheel and your husband's AI creation. Can't wait to
Thank
go
you.
look at
Thank
it.
you. And
All right.
could I offer that my email? I'll add it to the slide. I'm very passionate about this subject, and I know Shekhar would have welcomed that too. If you have any questions, because we couldn't cover it all in this, or something you haven't thought of in the Q&A, please just write to me. I'm very accessible.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay. Bye,
Thank you so
everybody. Thank you
much.
for being with us. Bye.